go along. But there is one position, Ryan. There's one position on this offense that is a definite strength, and that is tight end, and more specifically, Michael Mayer. I mean, at the end of the day, to compete for championships, in our view, you need stars. We've said this before, and Michael Mayer is a flat-out star. A case could be made, convincing one, mind you, that Michael Mayer is the best football player they have on this team. Now, Isaiah Foskey may step up and say, "Hang on a second, I have an argument to make for this," and I'd hope that he does all season. Brandon Joseph, Cam Hart. I mean, there's guys that can be in that conversation, but right now, Michael Mayer is Notre Dame's best football player. And if this offense is going to reach its full potential, he needs to play like it. That doesn't mean, right, he's got to go out and catch 9 balls for 130 yards every week. Sometimes he is going to play like a star and catch 3 balls for 32 yards. But because he's playing hard and blocking and running his routes and he's forcing defenses to just stay on him and attract to him, it's then going to open up some opportunities for other guys. And I've used this example for my coaching career. We went into a game one time and the opponent just said, "We're not going to let Yarden Brantley beat us. We're just not. We're going to double them everywhere we go." So Yarden had 3 catches for 6 yards, but we threw for well over 300 yards and blew out our opponent because I had 2 other receivers go for 100 yards, right? And we'll see some of that. If Michael Mayer's playing at a high level, it forces you to stay on him with multiple guys, which then opens up opportunities for other guys and takes some of the pressure off of those other guys. So it won't always look like him being a star from a production standpoint, but that doesn't mean he's not their star. And when he does get those one-on-ones, he has to dominate. That's a big key for this football team.
You said that you think he could argue for the best player on the roster. I would agree with you. I think that he has a very good argument for the best tight end in all of college football. I know that some people are going to say Brock Bowers, Michael Mayer, and it's a good conversation, because both are special football players. The difference and the reason that I would give it to Michael Mayer is because Michael Mayer has flashes in the run games where he's an absolute dominant two-way player, right? Like he's not just a pass receiver. And if he becomes an even more consistent blocker, then to your point, there's going to be weeks where just his presence is enough because he patrolled the run game, set firm edges, was able to wall off things in the run game as far as working off tackle and some outside zone stuff, working to the second level, combo blocks, doing all those types of things on top of the fact that, my man just caught, 70-something balls for over 800 yards and
71 for
touchdowns.
840 and 7 touchdowns, right?
Yeah, so he's a really dynamic football player on top of having that frame where he can also be a dominant blocker. So he brings that, he brings a physicality, and he brings kind of this demeanor to him, Brian, that I would normally kind of quantify with an offensive lineman a little bit. Like he carries himself like he's a superstar, obviously, but not a superstar as in a prima donna way. He carries himself as in I'm going to beat you up today.
Right.
I am going to dominate you.
Right.
And that is important because that sets a tone. He is the tone setter for this offense, for this defense, for the entire team.
Right.
Because they can look at Michael Mayer in practice, on game day, whenever, and say, I need to play with that type of effort. I need to play with that type of physicality.
So I think that's a big. I love the point you made there, and I was deciding whether I want to dive into that or just kind of move on. But I definitely want to dive into that. That's going to be so important for this entire football team. We talked about this in the defense. I wrote an article about it. We talked about it on a show. They have star power, but your stars have to play like stars, and it's not just on Saturdays. You need your guys to lead by example. Whether some guys can do it vocally, go for it. Some guys are lead by example. Go for it. But your stars have to set the agenda, set the tone. And that's what we're going to see if they can do this year. And Michael Mayer obviously is that guy on offense. And it's even more important for him because there are so few other established stars that are also healthy. Jared Patterson's a really good football player. He's, been banged up and he's a lineman. It's a little different, right? But you've got him and we'll get to his unit here in a second. But the stars have to play like stars. Here's another thought too. The scary part about Michael Mayer, I know that we can get kind of wrapped up in how he looks. And when you look at him last year, he looks like a grown freaking man that's already an NFL veteran. He's only gotten thicker. And obviously, he's had a tremendous offseason from everybody I've talked to, has shown leadership. I've talked about this the other day. I've talked to multiple sources who are like, yeah, Michael Mayer went up to this kid and was like, hey, you're working out with me today. Went up to this kid, hey, you're working out with me today. That kind of stuff. I'm hearing stories about things like that, just kind of showing that leadership. Because why? I'm gonna show you how to work today. But but you're gonna push me. I'm gonna push you. That's
Sure.
leadership. But here's the thing about Michael Mayer. His game still has plenty of room for improvement. He may look like a finished product, but he's not. You think of the Florida State game, just dropping that as good as he was that game. He had a chance to win that game in the fourth quarter and he drops the ball. Not because he can't catch, because he's thinking about, I'm going to run. He's had that problem in his career at times. I think the Clemson drop he had in the regular season when he's a freshman, it was the same thing. Started to run before he caught it because he is a good after the catch guy. We've seen him have some drops like that. His route running improved last year. It can get better, and his run blocking can get better. So I'm not going to focus too much on the areas where Michael Mayer's got to improve. That's not the point of this. The point of this is to say this guy was a stud last year, arguably the best tight end in college football, but he was a true sophomore, and his game is not finished developing. And if he's working the way we're being told he's working, it's kind of scary to think about what it's going to look like if Michael Mayer's healthy this year and he's got an improved game. Like who's the alpha? That's him right there and wearing number 87.
It's so funny, Brian, like working in the NFL draft side of stuff too. It's like people are always like, oh, I've heard literally people say Michael Mayer's a finished product. And I'm like, no, he's not. Like, he's not. I think Michael Mayer still has a significantly high ceiling. I don't think it's anywhere close to it. With how
Can
good
I ask
he is
you a
right
question?
Now.
Do you think that he's physically close to being? Because I think people look at physically. Well, he's kind of physically close to being tapped out. I think that's the perception because of how big he looks. But that in the NFL, that matters.
Sure.
But in college football, that doesn't carry as much weight for me because you're not putting enough on the game, right?
Sure.
And that's the thing is some people can improve because their bodies need reformation and restoration or transformation or whatever. In the NFL, it's more about the game, right? And that to me, when I look at Michael Mayer physically is not going to be that much bigger and stronger than he was last year. Is his technique better? Is his focus better? Is his footwork better when he's trying to block on the edge? Is he a little crisper getting into and out of his routes? Is he doing a little better job of attacking the leverage of the safety to try to manipulate him more effectively? Is he using his hands better when getting off of an aggressive linebacker? All of those things are, is he finishing better? Is he really working his hips around on a reach block? Is he really taking that wide step and then coming through with power on the second step when he's trying to block a 9 technique? Those are the things that Michael Mayer still has a lot of room for improvement. And that's a really, really scary thought. And that's where I think you're right, Ryan. I think people are not putting enough, the outside pundits are not putting enough on. You're getting wrapped up in what he looks like in his physical dominance. You're not focusing enough on this guy's game still needs a lot of improvement. And we're not saying that to be critical. We're saying that because he's going to work to improve it. And he made a comment this spring. He was talking about Jared Parker and how when Jared Parker first came in, the tight ends coach at Notre Dame, he was like the first thing Mayer made this comment. It was I wish I could find the comment because it was a really great comment. But he said, I'm actually going to find it because I want to play that. But it was kind of funny because you're starting to see a little bit more of Mayer's personality. I think I have this saved in our media thing, so I actually think I can play this. But he made a comment about how Jared Parker was kind of like getting on him, and he's like, Coach, I thought I had a pretty good year last year, and I really loved that comment. Let me try to play this. I'm going to find it while we're talking.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Brian, to your point, though, I would agree 100% with you. I mean, if we're being completely honest, Michael Mayer as a freshman could have probably physically competed on the NFL level.
Yeah.
Not saying he would have dominated or been this guy right now, but he could have played because of just how physically developed he was coming out. He was an advanced kid from just a body type perspective.
Right.
So I'm excited though, because to your point, it's about attention to detail,
right?
Right. It's about better angles, better hand usage as a passer, as a route runner. There's so many different things that he can do to still improve.
Because the question was, Ryan, you got a new coach. Is the new coach going to be one to come in and push the star? That's always a fair question. And this is what Michael Mayer said about Jared Parker. And I thought this was great. And Michael's response to it was great. So Ryan, just give me a thumbs up if you can hear this when it starts playing.
A lot of attention to detail with Coach Parker. He came in here. We went straight into the film room. It was, what do you need to work on? What do you need to work on? And that's what I love. That's what I love about him. He knows that He's hard on me. That's what I need in the coach. He's going to be very, very hard on me. And he's been pushing me to just get better. And I've been getting tremendously better this spring. Coming in to this spring ball, I was like, yeah, I feel like I had a pretty successful season last year. Got right into the tape with Coach Parker. And right away, he was like, this is what you're doing wrong. This is what you need to change right away. And I was like, dang, Coach, I thought I had a pretty good season. But that's the type of thing I like about him. And that's what I'm talking about when I talk about Coach Parker is the very attention to detail, the steps, if the defender's here, you can do 3 different things instead of 2 different things. You can do 5 different things when the defender's on this hip, that type of thing. And that's the type of stuff I'm going to improve on. And I have been improving on.
Like, it's one thing for a coach to come in and try to coach up the star. It's another thing that's a bigger question if the star is going to take it. And I just love Michael's honesty there. Like, dang, Coach, I thought I had a pretty good year last year. But then he goes on to say, but I want that. I want him to come in and push me and challenge me. And it sounds like that's gone really well so far. And he talked about, like, there are areas where my game can improve. And that's what I love about what they've done, because in the past, I felt like at times once a guy reached a certain status, the staff wouldn't push him as much as they would other guys. And I like that Jared, because I think that's also smart for Jared Parker, because he's got to come in and say, hey, look, if I'm going to be critical of him, you better believe I'm going to be coming and making sure you're improving your game. And it's just such a great standard of, hey, everyone's going to get coached and everyone's going to be held to a higher standard. I don't care if you're the guy that shattered every Notre Dame single season record or not. And I think that was good. But then for Michael to embrace it the way that he has, and he said that publicly, I've also heard that privately, that he's embraced that. It says a lot about what this kid can be. And that's what we talk about, Ryan. If you can have that type of player to build around, it does give you a good foundation to start off with when you get to fall camp. Like, hey, we know we've got this. Let's build around this and then see how the rest of the parts kind of fall into place.
Well, having your best player being such a hardworking presence to get better to that degree, right? Because your captains and your leaders don't always necessarily have to be your best players. But I feel like with him, I mean, Isaiah Foskey is this way to a degree as well. But people are going to follow Michael Mayer just based upon who he is, right? And if he has good habits as a worker, people are going to follow behind him, right? So not only is he working to be better at his own craft, I think people are also going to emulate him because they want to be Michael Mayer, not just in the tight end room. Like, they want to be the stars of college football. They want to be preseason All-Americans. They want to be projected to go in the first round. And Michael has such a subtle confidence to him, but he's not like incredibly outspoken, right? Like, but you just being around him and just watching him, right? Like, you can just see it. Like, he has a good personality and all that good stuff. But, like, he could just walk into a room and you're like, that's a dude, like, that's a dude. And that's what we want to be right there. So he's the key to this offense because he's your most proven commodity coming back. Maybe outside of Jared Patterson, we'll argue that.
I think he's your most proven commodity because I think Jared Patterson has the most experience, but he's never played at the dominant level that Michael Mayer's played at. He's flashed it. Michael Mayer was dominant from the beginning of last season to the end of last season. And Jared Patterson's never had that kind of season at Notre Dame. So I think that is a very important part of this. And I think the final thing, and we'll move on to the next aspect, is on Michael Mayer, is I'm really looking forward to seeing if or how Notre Dame evolves his usage. And here's some areas I'm going to look for in fall camp, right? When the season starts, I'm going to see, okay, do they move him around more? Do they use him more in the boundary in ways in the pass game as well as the run game? Do they change how he's used in stuff? Like last year, he was almost all intermediate to short stuff. And then he would then use his athleticism and playmaking ability to make people miss or use his strength to make catches. He didn't do a ton vertically. You rarely saw Michael Mayer really challenging defenses beyond 15, 20 yards, which has led to some people saying, well, he doesn't project as well as this other tight end because he doesn't stretch the field. Can't and doesn't are two completely different things. And for me, I think with Michael Mayer, it's more of a doesn't, which is not his decision. It's not like he's like, hold on a sec, coach. I don't like that play call. I'm running a seam route instead. That's not how it works. All right. And the problem he had last year is this is how when you talk about O-line play, you know how O-line play hurts everything? If you're Michael Mayer or you're Tommy Rees, I can't call Michael Mayer on a lot of vertical routes. Why? Because I don't have the time to get him the ball. Right? We can't afford to do certain things. Now, there was early in the season a couple times, Jack Cohn hit a big wheel route against Toledo early in the game, if you remember that play, Ryan. But on that play where he hit Mayer about 20 yards down the field on a wheel route, he got hit right in the face as soon as he threw the football. Right? Because you just didn't have that time to get a tight end vertically down the field. Did a little bit against Stanford because Stanford had no pass rush. If you remember in the second half, he had a big play down the field for them. So if the offensive line is as good as we think it's going to be, and we'll talk about that here in a second, then I do hope that we see Michael Mayer's usage expand. I am not criticizing Tommy Rees at all for how he was used last year. I get it. You can't ask your best player to go run way down the field if you don't think you can protect. You have to use him to protect the offensive line by using his size. So that's something I'm curious to see, because if he can become more of a vertical threat, meaning from a usage standpoint, if they will be more willing to put him into the boundary in 11 personnel, like let's say they're going 11 personnel and they've got Lorenzo Styles and Braden Lindsay and Avery Davis on the field, is it out of the realm of possibility to say, hey, look, let's put Michael Mayer backside and let him play the W position and win? And how's the defense going to react to that? Are they going to keep a cornerback over there, which means now I have two of my receivers lined up against a non-cornerback? Are they going to put a safety over there, which means I'm going to that matchup all day? Are they going to try to put a linebacker out of the box to try to protect against that? Okay, cool. Now I've got my read zone stuff. I've got my inside zone. Like, if he can be effective making plays in them, if you just line him up there, it doesn't do anything. You've got to show that you're willing to throw the ball to him over there on more than just RPO hitches and outs. I mean, are you willing to let him catch some back shoulder stuff, maybe bang some deep end cuts and things like that, run some comeback routes? Some of the stuff you do at the boundary position, if you're willing to do that, it puts defenses in a really tough bind when you have a guy as good as him. And we saw this a lot with Tyler Eifert back in 2012 and 2012 more so, because in 2011 you had Michael Floyd doing a lot of that stuff. But in 2012, we saw them do that at times. Now, they're not the same player, right? Tyler Eifert was more, flexible and a little bit more of a, former receiver playing tight end, which is what he was at, Bishop Dwenger in high school. Michael, I still think, can do a lot of things there. It's going to look a little bit different. But when I compare him to Eifert, Ryan, I'm more of saying the impact that Eifert had when he was there, not saying a tit for tat, thing. And look, who benefited from Mayer's ability to do all that stuff? It was Tommy Rees and Everett Golson, right? Who got to, make some big plays to Tyler Eifert in those years together. So I think that's the final piece, right? I'm very curious to see how Tommy Rees and Jared Parker are going to use Michael Mayer this year in regards to expanding his role in the offense. And the other thing that does too, Ryan, if you're willing to move him around even more, put him at W, put him at Z, put him at X, it now makes it a lot harder for the defense to game plan around him, because you never know where he's going to be. And if you are going to overreact to him, there are things they can do to get you to overreact further outside the box, which then opens up some run game opportunities.
Yeah, that I am a fan of Tommy Rees has an offensive mind. I think that he can scheme some great things up. And kind of how I talked about the defensive day, about people are going to just have their kind of bullseye on number 7, Isaiah Foskey, right? And just kind of probably going to slide a lot of protections that way, get a couple guys on him, leave some tight ends in at times, all that type of stuff, trade and then get the tight end on him. Like, they're going to do a lot of different things to try to combat him. I think it's the same way with Michael Mayer on offense. And how do you do that? You don't combat that theory by just putting him in the same position every play, right? Because then you're like, I know how to stop that. I just did it this play before. I'm going to continue doing the same thing that I'm still doing. You line him up at H. You motion him across the formation. You line him up in the slot. You put him into the boundary. There's a lot of things that you can do with Michael Mayer that you can scheme things open for him, right? And not only to scheme things open for him, but then to your point, Brian, as he's going in motion across the formation, the eyes are going to 87, right? The attention is going to 87, which means there's going to be a one-on-one somewhere else, right? There is going to be another player that has an advantageous situation, an advantageous one-on-one opportunity. And I personally do believe in Lorenzo Styles getting a one-on-one opportunity. I believe in Braden Lindsey getting a one-on-one opportunity. I believe in Avery Davis getting a one-on-one opportunity. When those opportunities come, I think that Notre Dame can capitalize on it. But in order to force a defense's hand, and I know Tommy Rees knows this, he's a much smarter football mind than I am. He knows, and I'm hoping that we're going to see, is that Michael Mayer can do so many different things for us, and we need it for our offense to be as optimal as it possibly can.